There's a ton of nuance, Ryan, just like anything. But first, I would ask, what ecosystem are you using, right? So if you're using Google's AI ecosystem, a business suite with Business Drive and emails, Gemini is a no brainer. Pay for that premium plan, whatever it is, because it already has all of that business data that you're using the Google suite for. If you're doing a lot with Microsoft, you're in the Microsoft suite. A lot of people might not know this, but Microsoft's a big time investor in OpenAI. So there's probably some congruency there with training data and Microsoft between OpenAI and ChatGPT. And if you're already using ChatGPT and you have a Microsoft suite, maybe it doesn't make a lot of sense in my mind to just drop that, go to Gemini or go to Anthropic without any sort of context or history or data that you've been using previously. Now, just scratch that if you're not using Google's AI or Google's business suite or Microsoft's business suite, or if you're using something else, then it might be time to explore an Anthropic like Claude. If you're doing anything related to content creation, copywriting, coding, that's where I would look more at Claude Code. Or if you're doing anything more research related, it might be time to look at Perplexity. If you're doing anything more just media generation related, but you're not on Google's ecosystem already, that's where maybe a subscription to Gemini Pro, or I think it's called Google AI Pro at this point, that might be worth looking into as well. But as I'm rambling here, it's important to understand what business suite are you already using for your day to day. And then I would make a decision based on that.
I'm with you. And I think that ChatGPT has done a good job, and I've used ChatGPT for a bunch of stuff, so I'm not hating on OpenAI, of creating the custom GPT. And so they will be sticky in the market until other platforms create something akin to the custom GPT, because as a lead magnet, marketers are using custom GPTs all the time, right? And so until other platforms have something that can go out as lead magnets, people will be hesitant to leave ChatGPT, but it's not the best platform for all things. And I love it. I've got a ton of stuff in ChatGPT. I use it every day probably just to bounce stuff off of it. But I do think that that is a unique edge that, to your point about Google, they can scrape the internet and they have all this data, they have all this stuff, great. But honestly, do people really care if they have a custom GPT, right? And that's going to be some of the. I mean, it will go away
You've gone
eventually.
back to branding, Ryan. You talked about branding before. Think
Yeah.
about the branding power of ChatGPT or even a custom GPT. Nobody knows what a Google Gem is. Well, that's Google's version of a custom GPT, right? So you talked about the branding, and that's where OpenAI did such a great job with this back in 2022, I believe, where now if someone says AI, ChatGPT kind of coincides with that from an initial reaction. If someone says GPT or custom GPT, the light bulb clicks now for most people versus project or Google Gem or a module inside an automation or an agent, right? GPT and Chat GPT has some really good branding power right now.
And again, this is not a pro con of anything. It's just to push out there the idea for owners going, okay, hey, I've used custom GPTs, and it might be for what you're doing, a custom GPT is good, but it might be Notebook LM is better. It might be a Claude. Yeah, there's a bunch of different options. So reach out to Ryan Dozier, let him sort all that out for you.
And
So
that's the thing, Ryan. There's just so much nuance to this,
yeah.
right? It's not, he said I should be using Claude. He said I should be using Gemini. He said I should be using ChatGPT. Well, what should I do, right? Well, again, it's back to what are your existing systems? What are your existing tools? And where does your data lie? There is so much nuance to that answer based on what a business owner is doing in their day to day. For me to just sit up here and say, drop what you're doing and go explore Gemini, I would be doing a big disservice to your audience.
And that's why I like you. You know that. So I will just give you my full suite, and you can give yours, and we'll wrap this up here. So I use Gemini, I use ChatGPT, I use Claude, I use Perplexity. I will use Grok if I'm like really curious and want a different opinion, but don't really use it right now. As far as most to least, I use Gemini probably the most, and then Claude probably second, and then ChatGPT probably third, and then Perplexity. I use it a lot, just again, but that's more of like, hey, I need a stat for this. Hey, this, and I just found it's good for that kind of stuff, at least in the workflow that I have. You might say, no, Ryan, you're an idiot. Use Gemini for that. Okay, but for what I'm using, it's been pretty good for that. So, what is your kind of ranking? How are you kind of using them? So, if an owner goes, yeah, there's a lot of nuance here. What are you two guys doing? So, give them that perspective.
Yeah, I probably use Gemini and Claude. I would say way more than I'm using ChatGPT. I actually canceled my Plus subscription recently. And so anything that is, I would say, related to research or media generation or even web search, it's Google Gemini. Google has the best AI image model right now called Nano Banana Pro by far, in my opinion. They have the best video model right now called VO 3.1. There's, you could argue, Sora and Kling and some of these others, but it's Google. They have YouTube at their disposal where they can have billions and billions of hours of footage to train their AI video models from going forward. So yeah, anything media generation related or research or just general quick search related, it's Gemini 100%. Anything that involves, I would say, a little more thought, whether that is copywriting, whether that's a reasoning prompt, whether that is coding or anything more technical, it's hands down Claude for me. I think Claude Opus 4.5 is probably the best AI model right now for general business use. Gemini 3 is probably the best AI model right now for general personal use. And so those are some things I'm using Claude for. Again, I've explored Claude Code a little bit. I won't go down that rabbit hole. I actually don't use Perplexity or Grok a lot in my workflows. I use make.com still for automations, which is an alternative to N8N or Zapier. And so I'm using a tool called Open Router in between that to transfer between the models, but that's a little technical there and a little down the rabbit hole. But those are kind of my systems right now, Ryan. You know, I'm exploring AI tools and a ton of different setups here and there, but I've really stuck to really a main, I would say, 3 to 5 platforms and don't try to venture too far off from there in my day to day.
Yeah, and with Perplexity, I would say I can probably use Google Gemini for that. I've just used it. It's like okay,
It's a good
so
point
so
too, right? Because people need to
yeah,
understand that not only ChatGPT, but Perplexity and Claude, where do you think they're getting their
yeah,
responses from?
right,
They're still
right,
retrieving results from Google search, from Bing
yeah,
search,
that's
and
right,
from whatever
that's
other
right.
training data that they're using.